Halothanes and fluorines are inhaled anesthetics used primarily for the maintenance of anesthesia for patients undergoing surgery. Now let's hop right into this high-yield topic by visiting this florist around the corner. Of course, we can't be in a flower shop without the florist. This florist really knows his flowers. From tulips to roses, he's got it all. This florist can help you remember the fluorine drugs, a group of inhaled anesthetics which are used for the maintenance of anesthesia. High-yield drug names to remember in this class include enflurane, desflurane, isoflurane, methoxyflurane, and sevoflurane. These drugs all end with fluorine, which you can remember using this florist shop. Get it? It's the floral fluorines. The florist really knows how to make rings of flowers. Check out those flower wreaths arranged in a circle or halos on the wall. The florist is even wearing one of those rings of flowers on his head, which makes it look like a halo above the head, right? By the way, these halos can help you remember the other important inhaled anesthetic we'll talk about, halothane. Get it? A halo, of course, for halothane, or halothane. Halothane, like the fluorine drugs, is an anesthetic used primarily for maintenance of anesthesia. As for why it's used for maintenance of anesthesia, that's something I'll touch on shortly. The customers of every florist have one thing in common. That's right, they sniff or smell the flowers. Check out how this customer is just inhaling the sweet scent of the flowers. This picture should help you remember that halothane and the fluorine drugs are inhaled anesthetics. Yeah, I'd like to see you try injecting flowers. Just inhale and appreciate the floral, my friend. And what do you do unconsciously when you smell flowers? Yep, you're right, you close your eyes. As this lady inhales the sweet smell, she seems to be closing her eyes, letting herself drift off into her happy place. So relaxing. You know what closing your eyes here reminds me of? That's right, going to sleep. And that's exactly what these drugs do. They maintain anesthesia by inducing CNS depression. The exact mechanism by which this happens is unclear, but it is thought to involve some GABA signaling and some modulation of potassium channels. But that isn't important. What's important is that we use these drugs to put people to sleep. So what is this lady smelling anyway? It seems to be a white rose dipped in a red fluid of some sort. You know how florists soak flowers in colored liquids to get tinges of colors into otherwise white flowers? The red fluid slowly melds into the flower and puts these red tinges in the flower itself. I'm serious, this is a thing. Look it up if you're unsure. Anyways, the red, blood-like fluid is mixing into the flower, which should help you remember that these drugs have high blood solubility. Since these drugs are gases, this functionally means that they have a high blood gas partition coefficient. Wait, what? Okay, let me unpack this a bit since it can be confusing. The blood gas partition coefficient is the functional measurement of the solubility of any gas in blood. Basically, after we expose an anesthetic gas to blood for a long time, some of it will mix or dissolve into the blood and bind to plasma proteins, to an extent dependent on its blood solubility. The more blood-soluble the gas, the more it will dissolve into blood. We then measure the concentration of the drug inside the blood and compare it to the concentration which remains as a gas. The ratio of these concentrations gives a number which tells us the drug's blood solubility, formerly known as the blood gas partition coefficient. Still with me? Good. The blood solubility of halothane and fluorines is high, which you can remember by picturing these flowers easily mixing with this red blood-like fluid. Now let's get back to the story to help you learn the next concept. Oh no, not the MacBook! Since this lady closed her eyes to inhale these flowers, she didn't see her hand smacking this MacBook off the countertop. We'll get back to the MacBook in a moment, but I want you to focus on our lady's companion. Oh, so close. Her husband tried to rescue the MacBook, but he moved just a bit too slow. This slow timing can help you remember something else that works slowly. Halothane and fluorines. Yeah, these drugs have a slow induction and slow recovery. The reason why is related to the high blood solubility we just talked about. Here's the gist. Gases need time to mix into the blood in the lungs. High blood solubility means that more drug mixes into the blood at steady state. This also means that the mixing process will take longer. In medical terms, drugs with high blood solubility equilibrate slowly. The chemical kinetics here are complicated, but if I had to simplify it, I would just say that mixing takes time. Clinically, this is why these drugs are used for maintaining but not starting anesthesia. Because these drugs have high blood solubility, they take a long time to mix into the blood after being inhaled. They are also slow to mix out of the blood. Therefore, halothane and fluorines have a long duration of action, or a slow recovery. Think of entering the blood like entering a poppin' club in the city. It takes a long time to get in, but once you're in, it takes a long time to get out. I might have discovered why this flower shop smells so floral. It's because they soak the flowers in oil for that reed diffuser. See that flower mixing its scent into the oil? Coincidentally, this flower mixing it into oil should help you remember the high lipid solubility of halothane and the fluorine drugs. Because high lipid solubility just means that these drugs mix readily into fats and oils, right? Clinically, high lipid solubility means that these drugs are super potent. To help you remember this fact, check out how there are actual fumes coming off of the reeds. Holy, this is some potent stuff. Again, this potent smell spreading through the flower shop can help you remember that halothane and fluorines are extremely potent. Small doses can therefore achieve a big effect. This is related to their high lipid solubility, because in order for these drugs to work, they need to diffuse across lipid membranes and enter the fatty tissue that is the brain. That's right, high lipid solubility is important for crossing the blood-brain barrier, as well as for diffusing into the brain tissue that is rich in fatty myelin sheaths. There's actually more high-yield goodness to this, so let's dive a bit deeper. And by deeper, I mean lower to the floor. Yep, we've finally come full circle back to our fallen MacBook. Must be the machine that the florist uses for checkout. And just like how this MacBook is low to the ground, halothanes and fluorines have low MAC, or MAC. Wait, what's MAC, you ask? Well, just like how anesthesiologists use a fancy coefficient for blood solubility, they also have a fancy term for potency. MAC is shorthand for minimum alveolar concentration, which is really the minimum amount of drug needed to cause anesthesia. And since these drugs are inhaled gases, dosage is measured by alveolar concentration. Minimum alveolar concentration is just a fancy way of saying minimum dose needed. So how do we calculate this minimum dose, especially if every person is different? Well, we get a ballpark idea using the average of the population, of course. Successful anesthesia happens when patients stop moving in response to something painful like a surgical incision. Since every person is different, MAC is practically estimated as the minimum concentration of a drug needed to prevent movement in 50% of patients after exposing them to a noxious or painful stimuli. Again, this gives us a ballpark of the minimum amount of a drug needed to cause anesthesia. Since the M in MAC stands for minimum, this means that MAC has an inverse relationship to potency. In other words, the low MAC here means that halothane and the fluorines have high potency because you need less drug to produce anesthesia, making them more potent, right? Again, I like to think of MAC as minimal alveolar concentration needed, with extra emphasis on the word needed, with less drug needed if the drug is more potent. In summary, halothane and fluorines are highly lipid soluble, making them highly potent, with low MAC. This terminology can be confusing, but it's really quite simple. Alright, back to the story. This florist here is not happy about her broken laptop. In fact, in a fit of rage, she's taken one of the flower hearts she sells and tore it in half. Of course this flower shop sells hearts. What are flowers for if not for love? But this heart being destroyed can help you remember that these inhaled anesthetics can cause cardiac depression or collapse. This manifests as bradycardia and hypotension due to decreased cardiac output. This is one of the reasons anesthesiologists keep pressors in their back pocket. Next, let's look back to the fallen MacBook. It seems like this machine is really beyond repair. I mean, even the fan has popped out. This broken computer fan can help you remember that halothanes and fluoranes can also cause respiratory depression or collapse, since fans move air just like the lungs, right? Halothane and enflurane decrease tidal volume and minute ventilation and can cause hypercapnia. Many patients receiving these inhaled anesthetics therefore need to be intubated or have some sort of ventilatory support. Another undesirable effect is the suppression of mucociliary clearance, which may predispose to postoperative atelectasis. Anyway, just remember this computer fan popping out to remember respiratory depression. A fallen MacBook? A broken fan? This florist seems to have lost it. She's furious. There's even steam coming out of her ears. Talk about hot-headed. This florist with steam coming out of her ears is here to help you remember increased intracranial pressure. Because halothane and enflurane increase cerebral perfusion, they can lead to an increase in intracranial pressure. Just think of all that blood rushing to her head. She's definitely got increased perfusion. Yet another side effect that is important to remember is hepatotoxicity, which we've symbolized here with this liver-shaped rag. Yep, even florists need to wipe down their counters, and this shop is no exception. This liver-shaped rag is here to help you remember that these drugs, especially halothane, are hepatotoxic. So if you see a patient who presents with fulminant liver failure with elevated LFTs after surgery, think halothane as a potential cause. Alright, we're almost done here. Gosh, it's super hot in here. Guess they gotta keep greenhouse-like heat in here for the flowers. Just check out that bursting thermometer. The temperature here is burning hot. By the way, this can help you remember a rare but important side effect of inhaled anesthetics: malignant hyperthermia. Malignant hyperthermia is a rare, life-threatening condition presenting as fever and severe muscle contractions. This occurs due to inherited mutations in the ryanodine receptor, which controls calcium release in muscles. In select patients, administering halothane or enflurane can lead to excess release of calcium, causing widespread muscle contractions. This generates a ton of heat, and the resulting metabolic changes can cause tachycardia and hyperkalemia. Yep, these patients look sick. Luckily, you can treat them with dantrolene, a ryanodine receptor antagonist. Phew, this has been a thoroughly fun adventure at this florist. Let's recap and get out of here. Halothane and the fluoranes drugs are inhaled anesthetics used primarily for the maintenance of anesthesia. These drugs have high blood solubility, which makes them equilibrate slowly, which therefore gives them a slow onset of action and slow recovery. Since they are highly lipid soluble, they are very potent, with a low minimum alveolar concentration, or low MAC, needed to exert anesthetic effects. Side effects to note include hepatotoxicity, especially with halothane, as well as myocardial depression and respiratory depression. Increased cerebral blood flow can lead to increased intracranial pressure. Lastly, watch out for malignant hyperthermia, which is a rare, life-threatening condition which presents with fever and extreme muscle rigidity. And that's it for this scene on halothane and the fluoranes. I guess it's time to go out and smell the roses, or something like that.